Welcome into another edition, a Monday morning of Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, what if the Senior Bowl director makes a bold proclamation about one of the Falcons players? What if? Also, we'll look at the Braves a quarter of the way through the season. And again, I keep asking, maybe we should have just waited. No, not us, the media. They should have just waited. It's all next on Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Thanks for joining me on this Monday edition of Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta. I want you to head to youtube.com, put Locked On Sports Atlanta into the browser, find us, hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, put some comments in there, and of course, follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. I'm going to read you a quote. We're going to read this from Jim Nagy, who is the senior director, or the director, I guess, of the Senior Bowl director, Jim Nagy. This is what he had to say the other day, or he put out in a tweet. Quote, "One of our favorite picks in the entire draft, twitchy, violent, fast, and productive. Perfectly suited for ATL's 3-4 outside linebacker. Should add to pass rush as rook and double-digit sack potential." Now, who is he talking about? He's talking about DeAngelo Malone, the outside linebacker, edge player from Western Kentucky. 61 games in 5 seasons, 32 and a half sacks, had 6 or more each of the past 4 seasons. He is the school's all-time leading sack guy, and of course, from Cedar Grove High School here in the Atlanta area. That's pretty high praise. You know, Nagy's a guy who sees a lot of guys come in and out over these last few years. And obviously, with running the Senior Bowl, the Falcons are very heavily involved in that. If you look, the last 2 years, the Falcons last year, in their first year with this new regime, they had 5 of their 9 draft picks that were at the Senior Bowl. This year, 5 of the 8 picks that they had were at the Senior Bowl. But what if Nagy's projection is correct? What if Malone could be a double-digit sack potential guy? And obviously, pairing him up with Arnold Ebiketie, you got Lorenzo Carter. What if it would be hard to imagine the idea of the Falcons finding, and you hear me laughing, not just one, but maybe 2 potential pass rush guys. Look, I love Malone, and I anytime you tell me that a guy is the all-time leader in sacks at his school, I don't care if he played at Montana State. I don't care if he played at Bethune-Cookman. I don't care if he played at Agnes Scott. Okay, if he's the all-time sack leader at his school, there is something to that. And I love the fact that Malone has that pedigree, and I love the fact that people are talking about him. It seems like in this draft that we saw some guys that were really highly praised that either fell or just the Falcons decided to pick. Whether it was Troy Anderson or Desmond Ridder or DeAngelo Malone, there are certain guys that you keep reading about, or, even Arnold Ebiketie, that were like, wow, I'm a little bit surprised he fell, or, he found a perfect landing spot, or this, that, and the other. So I'm excited to see, because could you imagine, just bear with me for a second, okay? Could you imagine the idea that the Falcons had more than one double-digit sack guy on their roster? Could you imagine a world that we would live in where 2 guys could combine for over 20 sacks? And you're talking about 2 guys, whatever, 10, 12 sacks apiece or whatever. Whew. Now, look, I don't want to get out too far ahead of my skis and all that good kind of stuff, or whatever the saying is, with all of it. Obviously, he's got a lot to learn. Obviously, the competition level will ramp itself up. I mean, look, with all due respect to DeAngelo Malone, there are no Trent Williams. There are no David Bakhtaris in the games that he played against Western Kentucky. Okay. When he lines up against some of those really super stud, left tackles and tackles just across the league in general, there aren't a lot of those guys that he saw in college. So much like Anderson and guys like that we talk about having that learning curve and trying to get themselves acclimated, though, But sometimes when all you're going to ask a guy to do, and I think that's all they're going to ask him to do, if you limit, narrow focus what his role has to be, and that is, son, we're going to put you in this spot here, and all I want you to do is go upfield and get the quarterback, set the edge, and get upfield and go get the quarterback. If that's all that he's asked to do early on and, in this rookie year, things like that, because, again, he's not going to start. I mean, that's Ebiketie, that's Lorenzo Carter. Those guys will most likely start on the outside, and it will be their job to go sack the quarterback. But maybe Carter doesn't get a lot of production. He doesn't sack the quarterback very often. Okay, now I bring in Malone, which you're going to rotate defensive ends and your defensive line anyway. I bring in Malone and I tell him, you've got one job, right? You've got one job. I want you to line up. I want you to set the edge, and I want you to get upfield and get after the quarterback. And maybe that's something where Dean Pease gets him to thrive in. We heard last year about Richie Grant and, the complexities of the defense and struggling to get on the field and this, that, and the other. And it led to him only playing 23.5% of the snaps for the Atlanta Falcons last year as a second-round pick. Now, ideally, as a second-round pick, you would love to see your guy play a lot more than 23.5%. But Pease was pretty consistent in his message that if he doesn't know where to line up and this, that, and the other. So you start talking about a guy like Richie Grant, and you're asking him about coverage and run support and this and that, and, who am I supposed to cover? And, okay, I get it. There's a lot more complexities when you start talking about defensive backs coming into the league. But we've seen plenty of guys, and we saw a bunch last year. Think about Azeez Ojulari and guys like that people were sort of high on but didn't know what to expect in the NFL. And Ojulari goes out and sets the Giants record for sacks in his rookie year. So there are plenty of guys that they come into the league and they've got this role, and here's what I need you to do, and you go out and do it. And again, I understand the big guys, Khalil Mack and Von Miller and, Bosa and, Aaron Donald, those guys are freaks of nature. But if you can ask a guy as a rookie to come in and be narrow focused in what he does, and he's got one role and one thing that he needs to do. I'm not telling you he's never going to play against the runner, this and the other, but by and large, if you can use him as a pass rush specialist and limit the different things he needs to do, don't drop him back into coverage and don't put him in guaranteed rundowns and things like that. Put him in a position to succeed, because you can tell that the upside is there. He's got a great football pedigree to it. When you get the Senior Bowl director talking about what he has seen, and again, Nagy's seen a lot of guys come through there. He's the guy that sees all those guys come in, year out. It gets you excited as a Falcons fan to think that, wow, okay, could we actually be building a legitimate pass rush? Because pass rush is more than just one guy goes out and gets 15 sacks. You need a handful of guys to help you out. And I don't care if, one guy gets 40 or, 5 guys get 8 or 8 guys get 5. Tell me how we get to 40 sacks. And I think Malone is going to be one of those guys that they're going to play him in a narrow role, turn him loose, let him get upfield, set the edge, and if nothing else, just focus on getting the quarterback. Let's hope what Nagy said about him holds to be true, because, man, you find a double-digit sack guy that late in the draft, it's everything you want in the NFL. That's when you really hit home runs in the draft. All right, when we come back, again, the media should have just waited. They should have stepped back and waited, but, of course, we have to be hot-takey. Doesn't matter if we're right. We got to be hot-takey. We'll talk about that next. It's Hitting Hard with Jon Chuckery on Locked On Sports Atlanta.